A photograph. That's all it was. A single photograph, placed face down on an old wooden table. The room was silent. No names were spoken. No birthdays were mentioned. No questions were asked. The elderly spiritual reader simply looked at the image, and then closed their eyes. Several seconds passed. Then they whispered only one sentence. Whoever this person marries, will discover that destiny has been hiding a truth that almost nobody can see. If somehow this message has appeared before you today, don't scroll away. Because today's story isn't really about you. It's about the person you are going to marry. The one whose actual age isn't the same as the number written on their birth certificate. No. We're talking about a different kind of age. The age carried by the soul. The age created through lifetimes of lessons. Heartbreak. Victories. Promises. And unfinished stories. By the end of this message you'll understand why your future husband or wife sometimes feels strangely different from everyone else. Why people have never fully understood them. Why they entered your life later than expected. And why your meeting was delayed until the exact moment your own soul became ready. But be careful. The final revelation changes everything. Because the spiritual age of your future partner doesn't only explain who they are. It also reveals what your marriage was always meant to become. Long before either of you were born. Before your names. Before your families. Before your first breath. Two souls made a silent promise. Not in words. In energy. A promise that no matter how many lives passed, they would eventually recognize one another again. Most people forget these promises. Life becomes noisy. Responsibilities arrive. Pain creates walls. Disappointments erase hope. But destiny never forgets. It waits. Patiently. Quietly. Watching every decision you make. Watching every relationship that failed. Watching every goodbye that nearly broke you. Because every ending had only one purpose. To make room for someone whose soul carries an age unlike anyone you've ever known. Think carefully. Have you ever met someone who seemed strangely familiar within minutes? Someone whose presence felt older than time itself? Someone who looked at the world differently? Who never seemed interested in childish games? Who carried wisdom that couldn't possibly belong to their years? That feeling isn't random. Some souls arrive young. Some souls arrive ancient. And according to many spiritual traditions, an ancient soul often chooses one final relationship before beginning an entirely new chapter of existence. Could that relationship be yours? Let's discover something almost nobody talks about. There are people who are 30 years old. But spiritually they are only beginning their journey. Everything excites them. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every challenge becomes their first teacher. Their soul is still collecting experiences. Then there are people who may be 25. Yet carry the emotional depth of someone who has lived 100 lives. They forgive easily. They understand pain without needing explanations. They rarely chase attention. Silence comforts them more than applause. Crowds exhaust them. Meaning attracts them. And strangely, they often feel as though they never truly belong anywhere. If the person you are going to marry is one of these souls, their actual age isn't measured by calendars. It's measured by everything their spirit has already overcome. That's why they sometimes disappear without explanation. Not because they don't care. Because they retreat to heal. That's why they forgive people who never deserved forgiveness. Not because they're weak. Because they've learned that carrying hatred is heavier than releasing it. That's why they notice tiny details everyone else ignores. Because ancient souls don't only observe actions. They feel intentions. Now listen closely. There is a reason destiny wanted you to hear this today. Your future partner has probably spent years wondering why life never seemed simple. Friends came and went. Relationships began beautifully. Then suddenly collapsed. Dreams were delayed. Doors closed without warning. Nothing followed a normal timeline. At times, they questioned heaven itself. Why is everything taking so long? The answer was always the same. Because they weren't waiting for success. They were waiting for you. Not your current version. The healed version. The wiser version. The version who finally understood that love isn't found through chasing. It's found through becoming. Imagine trying to place an ancient library inside a tiny room. It simply wouldn't fit. That's exactly what happens when an old soul enters immature relationships. The connection feels exciting at first. Then something begins to suffocate. Conversations become repetitive. Growth stops. Depth disappears. Eventually, the ancient soul walks away. Not because love vanished. Because purpose vanished. Your future spouse has already done this more times than anyone knows. People called them complicated, difficult, cold, emotionally unavailable. But the truth was much simpler. Their soul had already graduated from lessons other people were still learning. They weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for recognition. Someone who could finally understand the language their heart had been speaking all along. Now here's something extraordinary. Many spiritual teachers believe every soul belongs to one of several age groups. Infant souls. Young souls. Mature souls. Old souls. And finally, the souls preparing for transcendence. Each group experiences love differently. Young souls chase excitement. Mature souls chase understanding. Old souls chase peace. So ask yourself, whenever you imagine your future husband or wife, do you picture endless excitement? Or a strange feeling of finally being home? Because home, not fireworks, is usually the greatest sign you've encountered an ancient soul. But don't misunderstand this. Old souls laugh. They joke. They dream. They fall in love passionately. The difference is, their love never depends on performance. It doesn't require pretending. You won't need masks around them. You'll be able to sit together in complete silence. And somehow, that silence will say more than 1,000 conversations. That is extremely rare. Now let me tell you about something almost unbelievable. Some people unknowingly recognize their future spouse years before meeting them. Not physically. Spiritually. Perhaps you've dreamed about someone whose face you couldn't remember. Perhaps you felt an unexplained certainty that someone was searching for you too. Perhaps you've experienced moments where your heart suddenly whispered, "Not yet." Those moments weren't imaginary. Sometimes destiny sends emotional previews before physical meetings. Little reminders that the promise still exists. That neither soul has been forgotten. Here's another mystery. Ancient souls rarely arrive when life feels comfortable. They usually appear after collapse. After heartbreak. After betrayal. After disappointment. Because broken ground grows the strongest roots. Think about a farmer. Would they plant seeds on solid stone? No. The soil must first be opened. Your heart was opened through every painful chapter. Not to punish you. To prepare space. Space for someone whose spiritual age would completely transform the meaning of love. And here's where today's title becomes even more astonishing. The person you are going to marry has an actual soul age far beyond what people assume. Most people judge them by appearance. Their smile. Their clothes. Their career. Their birthday. But heaven measures something entirely different. How many fears have they conquered? How many people have they forgiven? How many times did they choose kindness instead of revenge? How many nights did they keep believing when everything around them encouraged surrender? That is their real age. And according to this message, it's far older than anyone realizes. Now imagine the day you finally meet. Perhaps you've already crossed paths. Perhaps you've ignored each other. Perhaps the timing wasn't ready. Ancient soul connections often begin quietly. There may not be dramatic music. No instant declarations. Instead, you'll notice peace. A strange absence of fear. Conversations flowing effortlessly. Time behaving strangely. Hours feeling like minutes. And without understanding why. Both of you will feel as though you've continued a conversation that was interrupted long ago. Because maybe that's exactly what's happening. Maybe your first conversation won't actually be your first. Maybe it's simply the continuation of one that destiny paused, until both souls were finally ready. Then something impossible begins to happen. Without anyone saying a word. Your future spouse will start remembering pieces of themselves they thought were gone forever. Not memories of places or names. Not childhood events. Something much deeper. A feeling. A recognition. An inner certainty that whispers, "I know this piece. I've been here before." That is one of the rarest signs that two souls with ancient spiritual ages have finally crossed paths again. Most people believe love begins with attraction. Ancient souls know differently. For them, love begins with recognition. Recognition of energy. Recognition of truth. Recognition of a promise that somehow survived every lifetime. This is why the person you are going to marry may stare at you longer than anyone else ever has. Not because they're trying to impress you. Not because they're judging you. Because part of their soul is searching for something familiar. Something it has spent years trying to remember. And when it finally finds it, everything inside them becomes quiet. Think about that for a moment. How many people spend their lives searching for excitement? Searching for perfection? Searching for someone who checks every box? Ancient souls search for only one thing: peace. Because after countless spiritual lessons, they've learned that excitement fades. Beauty changes. Money comes and goes. Status disappears. But peace. Peace is priceless. That is why your marriage won't be built on temporary emotions. It will be built on something much stronger. Trust that grows naturally. Respect that doesn't need to be demanded. Silence that never feels uncomfortable. And a friendship so deep that even difficult seasons won't destroy it. But here's where today's revelation becomes even stranger. There is something your future spouse has never told anyone. Not because they're hiding it. Because they don't even know how to explain it. Since childhood, they've always felt older than everyone around them. Maybe adults trusted them unusually early. Maybe strangers shared secrets with them. Maybe people constantly came to them for advice. Yet inside, they often wondered, why do I always feel responsible for everyone? The answer has nothing to do with personality. It's connected to their spiritual age. Old souls naturally become guides. Even when they're still learning themselves. Even when they're exhausted. Even when they're hurting. People somehow feel safe around them. And perhaps that's why you've been preparing your entire life to meet them. Not because they're perfect. But because together, both of you will become stronger than either of you could ever become alone. Now let me tell you something that may completely change how you see your past. Every relationship that didn't last. Every person who suddenly walked away. Every unexpected ending. Wasn't necessarily a failure. Sometimes heaven removes people because their lesson has already been completed. Imagine reading the same chapter of a book over and over. Eventually, you must turn the page. Your future spouse has already turned many pages. More than anyone realizes. They've experienced betrayal. False promises. Moments when they questioned whether genuine love even existed. There were nights when they smiled in public, but cried in private. Days when they encouraged everyone else, while secretly wondering who would encourage them. They learned to carry invisible weight without asking for recognition. That invisible weight aged their soul. Not with bitterness. With wisdom. And wisdom changes everything. Because wisdom teaches someone when to stay. When to leave. When to speak. When silence is stronger. When forgiveness heals. And when waiting is actually moving forward. This is why the timing of your meeting is so important. If you had met 5 years earlier, one of you wouldn't have understood the other. If you had met during your biggest heartbreak, fear might have pushed you apart. If you had met before learning certain lessons, the relationship could have become another unfinished chapter. But destiny isn't interested in almost. It waits for exactly the right season. Exactly the right healing. Exactly the right version of both souls. Here's something fascinating. Ancient souls often recognize each other through the smallest details. Not dramatic miracles. Simple moments. A familiar laugh. A shared value. An unexpected conversation that lasts until sunrise. The strange feeling that you've known someone forever, even though you've only just met. The world calls these coincidences. Ancient souls call them reminders. Reminders that heaven never forgets its promises. Now listen carefully. Because very few people understand this next truth. The actual age of your future spouse's soul isn't meant to make them superior to anyone else. An old soul isn't better. It has simply traveled longer. And longer journeys bring different lessons. That journey has taught them patience, compassion, humility, discernment. It has also taught them something heartbreaking. Not everyone is meant to stay forever. That realization changed them. They stopped chasing people. Stopped forcing conversations. Stopped begging for love. Instead, they quietly became the kind of person they had once spent years searching for. Ironically, that transformation is exactly what brought them closer to you. Because destiny rarely introduces two incomplete people expecting them to save each other. Instead, it often brings together two individuals who have already learned how to stand on their own. Then together, they become unstoppable. Imagine two ancient trees growing side by side. Neither steals sunlight from the other. Neither competes. Their roots simply grow deeper together. That is the kind of marriage waiting ahead. Not perfect, but deeply rooted. Strong enough to survive storms. Flexible enough to bend without breaking. Beautiful enough to inspire everyone who witnesses it. Yet there is one final mystery your future spouse still carries. Sometimes, without warning, they become incredibly quiet. Not angry. Not distant. Just quiet. People misunderstand this. Friends think they're upset. Family assumes something is wrong. But often, they're simply listening. Listening to their intuition. Listening to the quiet voice inside that has guided them through every major decision of their life. That inner voice has protected them countless times. It warned them before betrayals. It slowed them down before dangerous choices. It encouraged them to keep going when logic said quit. And one day, that same quiet voice will tell them something extraordinary. This is the person you've been waiting for. It won't be loud. It won't be dramatic. It will feel calm. Certain. Unshakable. And once that certainty arrives, they won't need the world's approval. Because ancient souls don't build their lives around public opinion. They build them around inner conviction. Perhaps that's why your story won't make sense to everyone else. Some people will wonder why your connection feels so different. Why there's so much trust. So much understanding. So much peace. They'll assume you were simply lucky. But luck has very little to do with it. This meeting began long before either of you understood what you were waiting for. Long before your birthdays. Long before your first dreams. Long before either of your families even imagined your existence. Somewhere beyond ordinary time. Two souls simply promised. When the lessons are complete, we will find each other again. And according to everything you've heard so far, that promise is closer to being fulfilled than either of you realizes.